are going to the chapter that is life processes. How many of you generally look at the environment and environment around you? So whenever you look at things around you, you will find there are various things around you. So some might be living, some might be non-living. We can always differentiate the living and the non-living things. And you all know living things cannot do the same kind of processes as the living things. Now, with that introduction note, let's look at the different kinds of life processes here. Now, you all must have come across these kind of processes in a normal living organism. Now, the process we are going to look at is the nutrition. And in human, we will call it as digestion. Then we have respiration. Then we have transportation and then excretion. Before I get into the details, let's have a summary of what we are going to study today. Today, we are going to have a brief encounter with the life processes. That is, what are the different life processes we come across and what are the different types of nutrition. And we will be emphasizing, or we will giving more importance in this particular session with the autotrophic nutrition, that is plant nutrition. Then we will be looking at how do plants make their food, and what is the process, how they make their own food, that is photosynthesis. Then we will be looking at the place where the photosynthesis is made in plants and what does it make plants very differentiated from the normal other kinds of organisms, and how do they fetch the raw materials for making this process. So all that we will be studying in this particular session. Now today we will be looking at plant nutrition. So we're going to emphasize on plant nutrition. You all know plant nutrition is completely different from the normal human digestion and nutrition. So let's take up whatever we have understood till now. Let's take up plant nutrition first. We'll take up plant nutrition today. Okay. How do you think plants make their own food? For that, it is not like they can just make through their body. They need certain kinds of substances so that they can get these food prepared. Now, what are the general raw materials we come across in plants which make their own food? The raw materials will be chlorophyll, carbon dioxide, and they also need sunlight and a little bit of water. We will be looking at why water is important, even though it is not directly involved in photosynthesis. Now, what is the term photosynthesis? Photo means in the presence of sunlight, and synthesis is to prepare or make. So in the presence of sunlight, making their own food, that process is called photosynthesis. Now, I have told you about the raw materials, but where do we get these raw materials from? Now, these raw materials, say chlorophyll, comes from a special organelle which is present in the plants, which are chloroplasts. Now, these chloroplasts are a type of plastids. So the organelle name, we call it as plastids, but since they produce chlorophyll, that is the green colored plastids, we give the term chloroplasts. Now, chlorophyll comes from these chloroplasts, and carbon dioxide comes directly from the atmosphere. But how do the carbon dioxide get inside the body of the plants? We will be looking at. Now, they have special organelles which are called as stomata. We will be looking at the structure after this particular slide. Now, stomata will help in exchange of gases. Then sunlight directly again from the atmosphere. And here the leaf plays a major part because leaf has its special type of nature so that it can capture sunlight through its structure. Now, water comes directly from the soil through roots. So the raw materials are all taken care of here. Now, using all these kind of raw materials, they make their own food, and the entire process we can give it in a particular equation. So let's take up the equation. CO2 in the presence of water, it makes food in the form of simple sugars, that is glucose, and it gives out oxygen, and it gives out little bit of water. Now this is the general equation we are looking at. Now if you want to balance this equation, so we will just balance this. It is 6 CO2 plus 12 H2O, then 6 O2 and 6 H2O. Now presence of the equation should always have what are the raw materials we are looking at here. So we will be writing here sunlight and chlorophyll. So this will be your equation, that is 6 CO2 plus 12 H2O in the presence of sunlight or chlorophyll. You prepare a molecule of glucose, C6H12O6 is glucose, the simplest form of sugar made by the plants. And remember, in photosynthesis, oxygen is given as a byproduct. That means the oxygen we get from comes mostly from the plants. And then little bit of water is also given out. If you want to try to understand how the oxygen comes out, remember, oxygen doesn't come from carbon dioxide. It comes from the splitting of water molecule. So the water splits into hydrogen and oxygen, and that's how you get oxygen from the photosynthesis as a byproduct. Now, since we have understood like what are the raw materials, what are the events which go on here, we will be understanding what are the events which take place in photosynthesis. What are the events in stepwise we will be looking at. The first thing is the conversion of carbon dioxide into a carbohydrate. So we will be carbon dioxide reduces to a carbohydrate. That is the first one. Now, second one, splitting of water molecule so that it generates oxygen. And sunlight is the most important thing through which photosynthesis is fixed by the leaves. So light energy converts into a chemical energy by the process of photosynthesis. Now these three major events take place in photosynthesis. So if you get a question like this, please understand that these 3 points are very, very important when when they ask you what are the raw materials and to explain the process of photosynthesis. So now, since we have understood this, let's try to understand what are the different areas of the leaf where this particular photosynthesis is done. Now, this is the structure of a leaf on your slide. Now, you all know how the leaves look like, and leaves have the lamina or the leaf blade. Then they have a central portion which is the thickest, which is the midrib. And you will find more number of the cells in this particular, that means more number of chloroplasts you generally find in this particular region. Now, you have smaller veins. So this is general structure. Now, what is with the leaf blade or the lamina? Only when the lamina is produced in a broader way, the leaves can capture that particular kind of sunlight. Otherwise, if the leaf blade are not open during the daytime, there won't be enough sunlight for it to continue with the process of photosynthesis. So the opening of the lamina or the leaf blade is the first step against photosynthesis. Now, here we can see vascular bundles, that is phloem and xylem. We all know xylem helps in transportation of water and different kinds of salts, and the phloem is for transporting food which is prepared by the leaf. Now this process we can give the term translocation. And remember, Food does not get transported in the same form it is produced. Food is generally carried in the form of sucrose, and the final storage in the plants is starch material. So the storage product is always in the form of starch, but it is always transported in the form of sucrose. So glucose is just the product of photosynthesis. Now, when we look under a microscope, if you want to take a peel of the leaf and then look under a microscope, you will find the different areas of the leaf under the microscope. Now, what are the different areas of the leaf? So you see that a leaf has an upper portion as well as a lower portion. So it has two epidermis, that is the upper epidermis as well as the lower epidermis. So here you have the lower epidermis and here you have the upper epidermis. Two epidermal layers we see because it has both the sides. Now the upper side also has a waxy cuticle. Now what is the importance of the cuticle? It helps the leaf to protect from certain kinds of microorganisms and to restrict the amount of water going out from the leaf. So this waxy cuticle is very important to protect as well as to reduce the amount of water through transpiration. Now the upper epidermis, below that you have a layer which is commonly called as a mesophyll. So mesophyll is again divided into a palisade layer, and you see a lot of air spaces here. So we give the term spongy layer. You find more number of stomata in the lower epidermis than in the upper epidermis, since what we are looking at is a dicot leaf. So in dicot leaf, the number of stomata are generally restricted to the lower epidermis level. It is not found on the upper epidermis. But for the monocots, you find stomata on both the surfaces. Now this palisade parenchyma and the spongy layers, you can see green colored structures which are nothing but chloroplasts. So the chloroplasts are found more on towards the palisade and the spongy layers, whereas stomata is found generally below the spongy layers or the lower epidermis. So under a microscope, you will be looking at this particular one, and what we have just seen is the dicot leaves. Now, I told you that stomata are very important because the carbon dioxide which comes from this particular structure. So this is the place where the exchange of gases take place, and carbon dioxide is very important for photosynthesis. Now, stomata are nothing but they are the modification of a normal epidermal cells. Epidermal cells in the sense the outer cells. So they're all modified epidermal cells because they are doing a special function here. Now this picture talks about stomata being open, and this one, what we are looking at is the stomata being closed. Now, what is the general structure of stomata? Stomata consists of two different kidney-shaped or bean-shaped cells which are called as the guard cells. Now, when the guard cells are moving apart, you find there is an opening which is called as the stomatal pore, or you can just give the term stoma. And as usual, cell, you will find a nucleus and you have chloroplast here, and you have a vacuole. The general plant cell, how it looks like, the guard cell also has the same parts. Now, surrounding the guard cells, we have epidermal cells. Now, epidermal cells are otherwise called as subsidiary cells. So, these epidermal cells will help to provide nutrition and energy which is required by the guard cells to open and close, because opening and closing of stomata requires energy in the form of ATP. So definitely there should be a nutrition part for the guard cells to open and close. Now, how does this mechanism undergo? So we all know morning time generally the stoma are open and stoma are closed generally during the night time. That is how we have understood. Now what makes them to open and close? The process is simplified process which is called as osmosis. Now what is osmosis? You all know, whenever you have a higher concentration of sugars and a lower concentration of sugars, in between them, you find the movement of water from the lower level of concentration to the higher level. That means if I am looking at a higher level here inside, then I have a lower level outside. That is, I'm talking about the concentration of sugars. So in stomata, we generally talk about sugars. Now, what happens when you have more amount of concentration inside? The water will automatically move inside the guard cells to make the concentration outside and inside in the same way. So then what happens when the water goes inside? This swells up, making the stomata open. The reverse occurs during the night time, where you find more sugars outside and the water will move out of the stomata, making them closed. The simple mechanism based on the content or the concentration of sugars for opening and closing of stomata. And with this part, we will continue doing so in the other sessions which continue. Thank you so much.